You ever think about how a place goes from being, well, basically nothing, a few lonely cottages on a windswept coast, to suddenly becoming this huge cultural phenomenon? That's the story of Blackpool. This is a town that didn't just happen to grow, it was engineered for fun. And we're going to dive into exactly how they pulled it off.
And look, this wasn't just about a beach getting a little bit popular. No way. This was a massive, radical shift in how an entire country spent its free time. So let's trace the steps, right? How did this quiet little spot for the rich and famous become the ultimate playground for absolutely everyone? All right, so the story really begins with the name itself. Blackpool sounds kind of dramatic, but it's not some romantic invention. It's literal. It comes from an actual black pool, basically a peat-stained stream that emptied into the sea. For hundreds of years, that's pretty much all it was, just a name for a quiet, out-of-the-way bit of coast. I mean, the scale of the change here is just staggering. If you could go back in time to the medieval period, you wouldn't even find a town, just a couple of remote farms. But fast forward to the Victorian era, and boom, it had absolutely exploded into this bustling city, crammed with boarding houses, theaters, and piers stretching out into the sea. This wasn't some slow, gradual thing. It was a full-on coastal revolution. So how did a revolution like that even happen? Well, it was kind of like a perfect storm of three huge factors. First up, you've got this new health craze. Doctors started telling everyone that, hey, bathing in the cold sea is actually good for you. Then, in 1781, a private road was built, which finally made this isolated coast a bit easier to get to. But the real kicker, the absolute game changer, that was the railway arriving in 1846. All of a sudden, millions of workers from the industrial cities could get to the coast for the first time. And you better believe, Blackpool was ready and waiting. But here's the really clever part. Blackpool didn't just sit back and rely on having a beach. Oh no. The people running the town knew they had to create a spectacle. They made a conscious decision to build an identity around being the biggest, the tallest, the brightest. They were literally engineering an experience you just couldn't forget. And that ambition, it was literally cast in steel. We're talking about the Blackpool Tower. Standing at an incredible 518 feet, it was a direct, bold answer to the Eiffel Tower in Paris. It was this massive statement of Victorian confidence, and the message was crystal clear. You're not just coming for a paddle in the sea, you're coming to see a giant pierce the sky. And then came the lights. What started out as just 8 little experimental arc lamps back in 1879, well, it grew into this jaw-dropping 6-mile-long spectacle. And this was more than just pretty lights. It was an absolutely genius business move to keep the tourist coming deep into the dark, cold autumn month. It was Blackpool's way of defying the miserable British weather. So, did it all work? You bet it did. At its absolute peak, Blackpool was pulling in 7 million visitors a year. Just think about that number. It created one of the highest population densities anywhere in Europe during the summer. It wasn't just another resort. It became the nation's undisputed capital of fun. And I really want to drive this point home. None of this was an accident. The massive tower, the miles of lights, the huge crowds, it was all part of a very deliberate strategy. Being the biggest, the brightest, the best, that was how Blackpool made sure nobody else could even come close. But, Blackpool was never just about the giant landmarks. The real magic, the thing that gets stuck in your memory, was the whole immersive sensory overload of just being there. It's a place you feel and hear and even smell just as much as you see. Yeah, to really get what Blackpool is all about, you've got to look past the postcards. You have to imagine yourself dropped right into the middle of this totally unique sensory landscape. That's what defines the whole experience. Just think about it for a second. The sound, it's not just the crash of the waves. It's the waves mixed with the constant whir and jingle of the slot machines. And the smell, it's not just clean salt air. It's salt air drenched in the smell of hot vinegar from the fish and chip shops. You've got that wind coming off the Irish Sea, the classic chime of the tram bell, the glow of all that neon. It all just mashes together to create this feeling that is 100% Blackpool. And hey, part of that experience was even edible. I'm talking about Blackpool Rock. It became the ultimate souvenir, a stick of candy with the town's name magically stamped all the way through the center. It was the sweet, physical piece of the memory that you could literally take home with you. But, as we all know, golden ages don't last forever. The world started to change, and Blackpool found itself facing the biggest challenge in its entire history.
Suddenly, cheap flights abroad became a thing, and the town had to fight for its very survival. It had to figure out how to reinvent itself, and fast.
So here's what happened. Starting around the 1960s, the game completely changed. Families that used to save up all year for a week in Blackpool could suddenly afford a plane ticket to Spain. And as those cheap package holidays to sunny places took off, the classic British seaside holiday, well, it went into a nosedive. This shook the town's whole economy right to its foundations.
But Blackpool didn't just get up and fade away. It fought back. The strategy was smart, and it hit on a bunch of different things. They started trying to attract business conferences to bring in money all year round. They poured cash into restoring their amazing heritage buildings, like the Tower. They modernized the seafront with new art, and they even upgraded the famous illuminations with new tech to make them more sustainable. And so that brings us right up to today. What we're seeing now is this ongoing battle for the very soul of Blackpool. It's this incredibly delicate balancing act, right? Between holding on to a past that everybody knows and loves, and at the same time, building a tough, modern future. And what's so fascinating, what's so cool about Blackpool today is how you can see these two identities living right next to each other. On one hand, you have the timeless, classic stuff, the donkey rides on the sand, the stunning elegance of the Tower Ballroom, the old Victorian piers. And then, literally right alongside it, you've got the reinvention, these massive, high-tech sea defenses, brand new digital businesses popping up, and these sleek, modern trams. It's like the town is living in two different centuries at the exact same time. So this all leaves us with one really crucial question. Blackpool's biggest strength, its greatest asset, is nostalgia. It's our collective memory of the place. But can a town that's built on yesterday invent a tomorrow that's just as bright? That's the challenge. And the answer is going to write the next chapter of this incredible story.